Alright, YouTube, there's currently a petition which has already well exceeded the threshold that it needs on the White House's site to repeal the National Firearms Act, that 30s era piece of sort of G-Men era crap legislation, the one that primarily masquerades as making it constitutional to fuck around with the Second Amendment, which clearly isn't the case. It's technically speaking, it should be unenforceable largely, but nonetheless passed anyway. Back then, people were more concerned with moral laws than they were with the Constitution. It was a dark time in our nation's history. But, the petition has gotten more than the 100,000 signatures it needs. I think it's got almost 250,000 at last count, so it will actually be responded to by the White House press secretary, by Spicer, presumably. Now, will Trump support it? Will he actually pledge himself to repealing gun control as opposed to simply not passing more? Because the Republicans, my problem with them is that while they claim to be conservatives, they don't actually stand in the way of bad legislation. They just slow down the hemorrhaging. That is, the Democrats, they want more taxes, more disarmament, confiscation / they call it gun control. It's not what it is, but that's the family-friendly term they try to use for it. They want less liberty in a fiscal sense for businesses and so forth. And when the Republicans are in office, or they're sort of sparring with the Democrats, do they ever go in the opposite direction and actually suggest repealing legislation that's already been put on the books? With regards to these things, no, they just stand in the way of additional legislation. The Republicans haven't really been a pro-gun movement in a very long time. They sit by and pretend that, guns are the lifeblood of the U.S. and gun control's bad, and yet they won't look at older waves of gun control and actually repeal them, which is what we should have been doing all along. Just like the Democrats are never really pushing social issues. They never push for more social liberty. They just sit by and say, you won't repeal Roe v. Wade, you won't discriminate against these homosexual couples, and they never actually lead the way on any of these issues. They're just fucking cowards. They sit back while a bunch of citizen groups, largely led by libertarians, do it instead. And that's the way it's been on taxes and guns with the Republican Party. But now we have a president who appears much more forthright on these issues. And he's got the help of people like Rand Paul, and even begrudgingly people like Ted Cruz, and Rubio, amusingly enough. It's like an unholy alliance of sorts, in regards to the Hearing Protection Act, which is going, I believe, through both the House and Senate, different versions of the same thing. And that one is essentially, yes, suppressors should be totally legal. There shouldn't be laws against them, specifically because their use is going to prevent people from fucking going deaf. You know, they go to the range all the time. They're not allowed to use a suppressor or something. They have to fucking get a license or pay a burdensome fee. Here in Vermont, they're outright illegal, which is the one piece of shitty Bloomberg-style gun laws that we have. Mostly, we're a very pro-gun state, with the exception of suppressors, which I believe the law here specifically calls silencers, which is fucking retarded and should make it illegal anyway, because there's no such thing as a silencer, but these people think that there is. Sort of like assault rifle, totally misused term, they don't even know what it means. So the Democrats, way out in left field, want basically no guns. They want a European-style system where you pay $10,000 a year to own, an airsoft rifle, essentially. Because it's just a backdoor to making people more subservient to their whims and the whims of government. But the Republicans, until apparently now, haven't really done anything to scale back existing gun legislation. They haven't fucking done anything. They sit by and they twiddle their thumbs and they don't want to talk about the NFA. So hopefully it does get repealed. It would be a good thing for this country if there were no substantial legislation involving the disarmament, involving burdensome fees and regulations on the confiscation or prohibition thereof of any of these small arms. We're not talking about heavy caliber machine guns and rolling fully functional tanks down the street. We're speaking of weapons that are in many cases badly outdated anyway. Oh, you can have a Tommy gun. Well, that's great. Yeah, you should be able to have one. Who fucking cares? Who are you? You think that it's actually going to get used by the average gang member? No, it's not. No, it won't. They'll use some handgun that they can easily conceal. They're not going to go down the street and start mowing people down unless they're a terrorist, in which case they probably can already get one anyway, let's face it. Or they're just a fucking psycho, in which case they're probably looking up plans to do so online, whether they're successful or not. So, who cares? It's not like the average person is going to use a Tommy gun for home defense. I don't think they want that many holes in their wall. But to be able to own one, yeah. And we could build more of an armaments industry, honestly, a civilian armaments industry. And who the fuck's going to think about dicking around trying to fuck us over in wartime either? If we do get into like World War III, it would be great if the domestic population was very, very well armed, because our nation, our culture would persevere well after the terror is done. Even if we got invaded, it's not like anyone could fucking do anything, even if we had already been nuked. They want to come take over the radioactive craters, they can't even do that. Sucks to be them, I suppose. No, the Second Amendment's not up for debate. The militia is the people at large. The Second Amendment applies to all small arms capable of being fielded by a sane individual. Doesn't apply to things like nuclear weapons and so forth. Those are in a totally different class. I think you'll find that the average individual would not be capable of using or maintaining them. They have nothing to do as well, if improperly maintained, with domestic defense, because if they blow up in their silo, you've just hurt yourself. But small arms aren't nuclear weapons. They're not grenade launchers. We're speaking of firearms. We're speaking of things that, it's like Obama wanted for a while there. He wanted a ban on lead ammunition, which went along with the use of lead sinkers. Now, I always thought, I think in some states they already outlawed lead sinkers, specifically because what's the point? You can use other metals for that. Yeah, maybe it costs like 1 cent more for 100 of them. Who fucking cares? But lead ammunition is more inexpensive. And the environmental damage done by using lead bullets is presumably not particularly great. I understand, yes, occasionally some turtle might swallow a used chunk of lead that fell off of whatever you were hunting, and yeah, goes and gets poisoned and dies. But it doesn't seem to have caused any significant problem so far. It's really just a backdoor to making ammo more expensive to prevent people from buying it, and to hobble the U.S. Arms industry. Not the military armaments industry. They'll do fine. They're not regulated. They can make things out of depleted uranium. They can make all sorts of goodies that would be considered far too unsafe for Tom, Dick, or Harry to use. But Tom, Dick, and Harry right now still use lead bullets, and I have no problem with that. So yeah, I hope the NFA does get shot down. At the very least, the Hearing Protection Act and Trump not being in favor, I believe in favor of several forms of repeal on Obama-era regulations involving, again, like ammo and some of these things. That's a great start, but it's just a start. If Trump wants to really, really ramp up his popularity in some parts of the country, going after the NFA would be a great idea. If he gets stonewalled by Congress, including his own party, he can grandstand against them. And if it passes, all those evangelicals in like Utah and Arizona that were kind of reluctant to vote for him, they'll vote for him in droves and say, hallelujah, at last, he's fucking the Messiah or something. It would be a great strategic move for him popularity-wise and in the realm of politics, number one. Number two, it does make our nation safer. No, I do not believe that gun legislation makes us more safe. I don't. We look at some other countries where people generally don't have guns. We look at Mexico. A lot of people, they just want to look at Europe. Oh, look at the UK and how safe it is. You know, just ignore all the stabbings and terrorist attacks and random beatings in the street and the fact that people can't even defend themselves adequately. No, I'd rather look at a nation like Mexico, where, generally speaking, people aren't armed. Unless they're cartel members. Then apparently the government has no problem with it. Or some of these citizen militia groups that finally got tired of everything going on there, and they're like, fuck it, we're going to get guns anyway. We're going to order them regardless. Some of these other third world nations, private firearm ownership is actually outlawed. But the left doesn't want to talk about that, and the right didn't want to take it up as an issue for a long time. They just wanted to sit on their ass and not pass additional gun legislation, which meant every time the Democrats held the presidency, along with the House and Senate, they pushed gun control. Except Obama in his first 2 years, he didn't actually push the issue. What a fucking moron. Could have at least scored brownie points with the left doing that. Not that it would have been good for the nation, but from a strategic standpoint, it probably would have been a good idea. But Obama didn't give a fuck enough. Then he'd rather wait until he loses the House than complain that he can't get anything accomplished. What a fucking moron. But Trump has the House and the Senate, and he's full steam ahead right now. He's only been there for a very short time, and if he goes after the NFA, really ingratiates, and I've got a very vocal cat here, really ingratiates himself to the right, then he can make his pivot to the center for the rest of his friggin' first term, and all those people will still be well on board with him. It'd be the most remarkable move he could make in a strategic sense. So I encourage him, yeah, you should go after the NFA. Get rid of it. Get rid of all gun legislation in this country. While you're at it, repeal all these other crappy-ass regulations that we don't need too. We've got millions of pages of this shit. Nobody can even understand it. You need a lawyer of lawyers just to tell all the other lawyers which page to look on to refer to things. We're gonna have a new class of lawyers. Index lawyers. Their entire job is to memorize the index to tell other people where to look to find all the regulations they can use to screw one another in the judiciary. That's about all. Peace out.